We spend a lot of time talking about tornadoes and hurricanes, but it is earthquakes that can cause hundreds of thousands of casualties in a matter of seconds. It may be realistic to expect something on the order of a 4 to 5 in the in the tri-state area at some point. Of course, you never want to rule out the off chance of getting a magnitude 6 or 7. That could, it's still in the realm of possibilities. And that would be, if you're starting to push into the sevens scale, which is highly unlikely, but not totally, can't science cannot rule that out. At that point, you're talking about a destructive, a massive catastrophic event. My name is Alex Nikulin. I am the associate professor and chair at Binghamton University, State University of New York. I received my PhD from Rutgers University in 2011, specializing in geophysics, specifically seismology of earthquakes and volcanoes. Most earthquakes occur in areas of tectonic activity where tectonic plates meet in an active environment. So when people think about earthquakes, they usually think about the Pacific. So the Pacific Rim, specifically in the context of the US, this would be California and Alaska. This is where large tectonic plates meet. And as they meet, they kind of interact with each other. And there's a lot of stress that builds up in the Earth's materials. When that stress builds up to a certain point, the material can no longer be deformed, and the best explanation is that you have a snap. You have a breaking of that material with an abundant release of energy. So the easiest way to visualize that, if you take a pencil, you start bending it, at some point that pencil will snap. It will make a sound, and it will also, you will feel that snap. That's energy being released by an elastic material when it reaches its breaking point. So the east coast of the United States is called a passive margin. We do not have two actively colliding tectonic plates. It's all basically merged. The continental plate is merged to the oceanic plate without a break in between them. If we had a break, it would be probably a subduction zone, and you would have volcanoes rising kind of in the New Jersey highlands. Also, our earthquakes are remnant earthquakes, meaning they are earthquakes that are a release of remnant stress that has been around for millions of years, and usually it's just little cracks that haven't yet released that energy. Perhaps the most famous fault in New Jersey is the Ramapo Fault, which has been active about 200 million years ago. And it has been releasing stress since then, but on a much, much lesser scale. The two recent earthquakes occurred along the Ramapo Fault zone. So the Ramapo Fault is not just a single area of weakness. It's basically a zone that stretches all the way from New York through New Jersey and into Pennsylvania. Earthquakes occur on and around it. And on average, they're about a magnitude 3, these were kind of in that vicinity. I think one was a 2.7, one was a 3.0. The largest earthquake on the Ramapo Fault is deemed to be about a 5.0, but that was recorded prior to the introduction of the Richter scale, prior to the introduction of instrumentation that could have positively recorded that magnitude. To put that into context, earthquake magnitudes go by orders of magnitude, meaning that a magnitude 3 is 10 times larger than a magnitude 2, and a magnitude 4 is 10 times larger than a magnitude 3, meaning that a magnitude 4 would be 100 times larger than a magnitude 2. So we just had magnitude 3 earthquakes in New Jersey, and just last week we had almost a magnitude 9 off the coast of Kamchatka in the Pacific, which caused the tsunami waves. Now that's 6 orders of magnitude difference. And 6 orders of magnitude converts to 1,000,000 times larger. So the Pacific earthquakes were not, 6 times larger. They were 1,000,000 times larger, or close to that. At these scales, I would say it's not uncommon to have one after the other. It's certainly, they're not in that kind of, very large earthquake window. But we have been having earthquakes kind of on the East Coast at pretty normal paces throughout the years, but with population growth, with an increase to instrumentation capabilities, people have certainly started noticing them more. The earthquake in New Jersey was felt as far as Albany, according to the USGS. When the USGS collects something called Did you feel it data, which essentially allows anyone to log in and say, hey, yeah, I felt this, and this is kind of what happened. I think that, it's hard to say, give a number per year. There's a famous quote by Charles Richter that only fools and charlatans predict earthquakes. But the best way to think about earthquake is forecasting. It's very similar to weather forecasting, right? If you turn on the weather channel, you'll never get, oh, it's going to rain tomorrow. There's a 90% chance of rain. Earthquakes are this kind of the same way, and the prediction for the East Coast is there's a probability of having 1 to 3 to 4 to 5 earthquakes a year on average recorded for areas like New Jersey and New York. Now that means that in terms of felt earthquake, I would say a good guesstimate is about one a year, because a 3.0 is kind of a magical cutoff. That's where people feel it, because you still have 2 more orders of magnitude to go down, right? You can go to 2, then to 1, then to 0 to 1. Actually 3 orders of magnitude. And those earthquakes are generally not felt. They're recorded. Instruments are, sensitive enough to record them, but humans don't perceive them as anything abnormal. It may feel like a car going by. It may feel like a train rolling by, but there's no train. That's kind of and sometimes people don't even pay attention to that. At 4, we started looking around, looking for damage. Once you get to a 5 and a 6 and a 7 range, that's when you're talking, okay, that's a major event. It may be realistic to expect something on the order of a 4 to a 5 in the tri-state area at some point. We've had them before. We probably will have them again. There's, of course, you never want to rule out the off chance of getting a magnitude 6 or a 7. That could, it's still in the realm of possibilities. And that would be, if you're starting to push into the 7s scale, which is highly unlikely, but not totally, science cannot rule that out. At that point, you're talking about a destructive, a massive catastrophic event. Because our area is just not prepared to deal with earthquakes the same way we're not necessarily, prepared to deal with, a hurricane in upstate New York, just because we don't really get them. The same way our building codes are not meant to address the concern of earthquake damage. I think the biggest myth is that if you have an earthquake in one part of the earth, it has these like ripple effects. And we always want to make sure we tell people that the fact that there's an earthquake in Japan yesterday does not mean that there's going to be an earthquake in New York tomorrow. We talked a little bit about the magnitude misconception, right? That folks don't need to appreciate the fact that it's a logarithmic scale, and you have these orders of magnitude that are often misunderstood. That a magnitude 7 is very different from magnitude 3, and it's not 4 times larger. We're talking orders of magnitude every time. But I think one of the biggest ones is, I think it was a tweet years ago when it was kind of one of those tweets where somebody's like, thanks USGS for not giving me any warning on this earthquake that happened yesterday. And, again, that's not something that we're able to do. We're not able to predict the timing, location, depth, and size of earthquakes at this time. We can give forecasts that are accurate over a long period of time, right? It's basically, it gives you probability, but the problem with probabilities is that, if you think about, a casino operating, right? They know that over 10 years, they will have their profit margin of whatever it is. I don't know. It's probably, 102%, right? But any given night, it might be different. So it takes a long time to get to that accurate forecast model.